All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. How else are we going to enjoy the Heat's opening game tonight? I'm going to be sitting on the couch in the Zaslow Mansion family room. I'm going to crack open a Johnny Cuba. That's how we're going to get down tonight. Go to johnnycuba.us. Use the Johnny locator. You can find the nearest location to you. A refreshing German lager in a can. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us now, ESPN's Jorge Sedano. George, do you identify now as an LA guy, or are you always going to be a Miami guy?
I think I'm always a Miami guy. I think it's based on, on the way people like describe me. I feel like most people at the company look at me as bi-coastal. You know what I mean? Like, although there's still plenty of people that in the business where I run into them and they'll be like, oh, like, where are you staying? Like, if I go to like a Laker or Clipper game, I'm like, no, I live here. And they're like, oh, that's right. Yeah, you don't live in Miami anymore. So there's still a lot of that. Trust me.
Now, I wanted to talk to you today. You were at the Laker game last night, NBA's opening night. And what did you make of the coverage leading up to the game last night? I mean, obviously the story, the focus was on Bronny and the history being made and making their debut together. And locally was the way that you covered it Bronny heavy as well.
No, we did not cover it locally Bronny heavy on our end. Like we covered I mean, it was an anecdote in our coverage that day leading up to it because I do the afternoon show leading up to the radio broadcasts on ESPN LA because we're the flagship of the Lakers. And then, on TV, I know that was definitely a bigger portion of it. I didn't watch TNT's pregame because I was there at the arena, so I didn't see what those guys were doing necessarily. And to be honest, I didn't get much of a chance to see what even we were doing per se before that. Although I would imagine that was certainly a part of the story for sure. But because I was on the air, I didn't get a chance to see too much of the coverage leading up. I saw a lot of the talk show stuff leading up that day. And I know that certainly was at least part of the conversation. But yeah, I think everybody was waiting for that moment. And I already going into it, I already had an idea that it was going to be in the second quarter. It was just a matter of when. And I think that it's smart for them to quote unquote get it out of the way, because if not, it just becomes something that builds and it becomes more of a thing than it needs to be. And I think that Bronny having a good last preseason game, I think helped that cause for sure, because it allowed him to go out there and just play for a couple minutes, give somebody a breather, and they can move on from that point. Bronny gets to accomplish his goal. LeBron gets to accomplish that moment for him. The Griffeys were right in front of me, so I got to see them most of the game. They were super pumped about it. And I thought it was kind of a cool sports moment to have that happen because, again, we've only really seen it in baseball and hockey previously.
So what happens moving forward now with Bronny? Like, you're right. It was smart of the Lakers to do it game number one, so we don't have to have the questions every game. Is tonight the night? Is tonight the night? Is tonight the night? So they get it out of the way in game number one. So what's the plan now moving forward?
Well, I get the sense that Bronny is going to have to earn minutes continually at this point. Like, those 3 minutes, I don't think, or 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I don't necessarily believe they were cursory minutes because I do think particularly late in the preseason, he played much better. And I do think that the Lakers are also still missing key components to their team. Like Jared Vanderbilt is a big part of what the Lakers do defensively. And even though he's not the greatest offensive player at times, he's okay, cutting off screens and things like that. He's not necessarily a guy they rely on for offense. So once he's back in the fold, which could be, in the next several weeks, I think that you'll see less of them going 10 or 11 down the bench. And I think that the plan is that Bronny is going to spend a decent amount of time. I don't even know if I would say significant, because I think that should just be understood that he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League. And the advantage the Lakers have is that their G League team plays in their practice facility. So all those guys are together pretty much all the time anyway, in a large capacity, particularly when the team, the big club is at home. So I think it makes it pretty seamless to have him transition between the two, much like the other two-way guys that have done that over the years with the Lakers.
What's the expectation for the Lakers?
I think the expectation is get out of the play-in. And to me, if you're out of the play-in and you're in the playoff in a really deep West, I think that that is a good first step. I think they believe that with better preparation and understanding of the plan and how to execute the plan, that they could have been in a better position last year, particularly. And the guys have raved about JJ and just his ability to get everyone on the same page and have everyone understand and prepared for the task at hand. Even in this last game against Minnesota, they were able to implement wrinkles before that first game. And I think that in a day and age where there's not a lot of practice time, I think guys appreciate his efficiency and how he delivers the message and the game plan. And I think, with JJ, I've known him for a couple of years now. I'm not surprised by any of this. The guy, I know he refers to himself as a sicko when it comes to basketball. And that's really the best way to describe him. He's a maniac. And I look at him and I think of, and I'm not saying he's these guys right now, but I think of, in regards to being a maniac, I think of Spo, I think of Missoula, I think of a lot of these guys who are just, eating, breathing, bleeping the game all day, every day. And he's one of those types of guys. So I think that if they can if they can get in that top 6, I think they'll be good. And I think if Anthony Davis gets to play the way that JJ would want him to play, and yesterday was a perfect example of that, I think he can be in that MVP mix, which would be fantastic for the Lakers, because if he can play like that, the chances are they're going to be closer to the 50-win range than that mid-40-win range.
All right, now you're at the opening of the Clippers building tonight, right? Yeah. Are you working that game?
Yes, I'm working that game tonight. I'm on the sideline with Dave Pasch and Tim Legler.
So no Kawhi. Can you explain to me, how does Lawrence Frank have the balls to be angry at Team USA for, replacing Kawhi, and months later, he's not ready to play?
Yeah, I was pissed off about that in retrospect once we knew that Kawhi wasn't going to play, because of that same reason. I just was like, what are we doing here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you blamed the Olympic team for this? Like, this is just silliness. Yeah, there's really no other way to put it, Zaz. Like, that was, I don't know if he was just taking up for his player, and I guess, that could be a decent reason for it. I just didn't love the look of it at all. I think the Clippers have done a pretty good job managing the situation, in a tough situation, with both Kawhi and Paul George previous to that. And I think that they also put Ty in a tough spot, I thought, with that and those comments. You know what I mean? Like, Ty Lue was on that staff. Ty Lue is one of the better coaches in the sport. Ty Lue, for all intents and purposes, is pretty straightforward in these situations. And to put him in that bind, I just didn't like the way the optics looked there with any of that stuff. So a rare misstep by a team that I generally feel like understands kind of what to do in those scenarios.
Are you doing a feature on the broadcast tonight? Like, something about how cool the new building is?
Yeah, I'll be doing stuff like that throughout the game. I'll be doing, one of the hits I'll be doing is from that area called the Wall, right, where it's just kind of that one big area behind the basket where there'll be all Clipper fans. And yeah, we'll be throughout the broadcast kind of highlighting all the cool features the place has. I've toured it beforehand, so I've seen it already. It is as cool of an arena as I've ever been to on the planet. It's not even close. I think Chase Center was probably that building just a couple of years ago. I feel like Intuit Dome blows it out of the water. It's kind of wild. And there's just so many things, bells and whistles, gadgets, functionality, the sight lines, all of it is pretty badass. And the scoreboard, it's very similar. People in LA will know. And if you've ever been to SoFi Stadium, I know the Dolphins have played there a couple of times. Maybe some Dolphin fans listening to your show have been to SoFi. They have that insane ring scoreboard that's, two-sided or whatever. So they'll have that as well at Intuit Dome. It'll be the first arena in the world to have one of those boards. But yeah, the place is going to be insane. And you shouldn't expect anything less from Steve Ballmer. The guy was, a tech magnet, you know what I'm saying? So no surprise. And he's obviously an incredible fan of the game in general and sports in general. So no surprise that they would spare no expense.
But if Kawhi doesn't play a lot, like, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the West, right?
I don't know do I think they're going to be, let me see. Like, their over-under is 35. I think Ty is a great coach. I think they'll be slightly above that number. But yeah, like I don't think that they're going to be a play-in team or a playoff team in the West because it's just so competitive. But I do think they're going to be frisky every night. Like, remember a couple of years ago, he didn't have Paul George or Kawhi pretty much for the entire season, and they won 41 games with Terrence Mann as their best player. Again, the West not as dominant as it is right now, but still, like I'm not ruling out that they're going to win a decent amount of games.
All right, give me some thoughts here on the Heat. This season, not that I'm not excited about the Heat, but going into this year is probably the least excited that I've been in a maybe ever, going into a Heat season.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I'm sneakily, like, very excited for them. I think that their floor on their roster is higher than it's been in the entire Jimmy Butler era. Okay. If you think about it, why? Because they're basically replacing all the guys who were G League type talent, okay, that they got the most out of. And we know that story, 20 times over, with guys who were all drafted in the first round, basically, right? Like look at, or drafted period. Like Pelle Larsson is a perfect example of a guy they're going to love, right? If you really think about it, outside of Duncan, and I'm trying to think, there's probably one other player that I can't think of right off the top of my head. Haywood Highsmith, right? Those two guys, outside of that, everybody else was drafted. So there was a real sense of, and almost all of them are first round talent. So to me, their floor from a roster perspective is higher than it's been. I think if anything, Eric has too many guys to choose from in some of these scenarios. I know fans are going to want to see Khalil wear a ton. I think that in very true Heat-like and Eric Spoelstra-like fashion, I think they're going to make him earn it. I think that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, Jaime Jaquez was a different story.
Correct.
He played 4 years.
Right.
He was ready to play right away. I don't think we're going to see a ton of Khalil Ware early on in the season.
I agree. And I think that the difference is Jaime Jaquez, the MO on him was, to your point, 4-year player, played in the Final Four in a championship game, went deep in the tournament multiple times, was the best player on his team multiple years, Pac-12 player of the year, right? Like a family of basketball players. I think with Khalil, I think the book coming on him was the talent is out of this world, but the 6 inches in between the ears have been the problem. Mike Woodson was able to harness that some after a rough time with Dana Altman at Oregon. So I think that there is a lot to learn still for Khalil. The talent is there, though. But yeah, ultimately, I'm high on the Heat. Like, I think the Heat will be a playoff team. I think the Heat in the regular season will probably be a home court advantage type team. I know most people will think I'm crazy when I say that, but I could absolutely see the Heat being a top 2 or 3 seed, 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And if they're healthy, I think there is not a team in the Eastern Conference that still doesn't want to see them. I know people are going to say, you say that every year, but I believe it every year. And by the way, I'm not wrong every year. Granted, there have been some circumstances, 2021, where the injuries got to them after the bubble and winning the championship. Last year, injuries clearly got to them. Jimmy getting hurt at the absolute wrong time in that play-in game against Philadelphia. I think they win that play-in game if Jimmy finishes that game with health. So I believe that in a 7-game series, the last team they want to see is this team. And yes, I believe that they're deeper than they've ever been in the Jimmy.
How about that? That's a good job out of you, George, getting the Heat fan pumped up going into the game tonight. I think, not that I'm not excited about the Heat, because I woke up this morning very excited for the game tonight. I think part of it was just with what happened with the Panthers. It's like my excitement level was taken up in the offseason by waiting for the Panthers to return, the Stanley Cup champion. And then it's like, all right, I'm also excited about the Heat, but not as excited as years past. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you better get fired up, ZASLOW. I don't want to hear this bull crap that you're not fired up for the Heat season.
I am. I told you, I woke up this morning very excited for the game tonight. I didn't want Jimmy showing up to media day with the bullshit. I thought him showing up looking like Jimmy Butler was a good sign.
Despite showing up 2 hours late or whatever from France or wherever.
I don't care what the reason is, all right? He didn't show up with the bullshit. And then the starters, including Jimmy, played every preseason game except for the last one.
Right.
And
he's playing for a contract. So let's be honest.
Okay.
And,
whatever.
I think that will work to the Heat's advantage this year for
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Like, let's get back. I thought Heat culture took a little bit of a hit last year.
Yes, agreed.
Like, part of Heat culture is taking all of this shit serious.
Yes.
And I don't feel like, and I understand, Jimmy started to disclose some of the things he went through last season, but it's not isolated to last season. And I thought that Heat
Agreed.
culture took a little bit of a hit last year,
I agree wholeheartedly. I feel like little by little, it's been slipping a little bit. And I think it's time to tighten the reins. And I feel like Pat's always the guy to do that, right? Like when he goes in those season-ending press conferences or whatever, and he makes those kind of comments, he's tired of the BS, like you said.
George, excellent job. Again, promote what you got going on tonight. LA Clippers, go ahead.
So I've got Clippers, Suns tonight on ESPN. And then, I know the Canes are rolling in the ACC. I don't have the Canes this week as they take on Florida State. That's an ESPN game. But I'm always on the ACC network. You can catch me on that noon game or 3:30, one or the other on ACC network every week. And maybe the Canes will be on there. Probably not. They're a little too good right now for ACC network.
Hopefully
but you
they
never
will
know.
not be. Hopefully you will not have any Canes.
The ACC will have so many crazy crazy tiebreaker scenarios coming up here over the next couple of weeks that you may be plugged in. You may want to plug in and watch the ACC network because they'll have you covered on all those tiebreaker scenarios because there's like 7 of them. It's insane with the potential tiebreakers between Clemson, Pitt, SMU, Miami, all undefeated right now in the ACC.
Yeah, like isn't there a scenario where if there's a 3-way tie, the Canes would even undefeated in conference, they would miss out on the
ACC championship game? Correct. Yes, it's possible. Not the playoff, but it's possible they could miss the ACC championship game if the scenario broke the wrong way. Yes.
Great job, George. Good catching up with you, man.
See you, bud.